Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are doing chronic pain compassionate conversations. And today's topic is about boundaries and chronic pain. So we are very excited to be here. I am Michelle Maricos, and I'm here with Julie Mavros. And we're just continuing our series about um, chronic pain compassionate conversations. So I'm so excited to be here. Julie, thank you so much for being here with me.
Totally, Michelle. Super fun conversation. I'm Julie Mavros, an ICF certified chronic pain and migraine coach, as I help people step off that chronic pain and migraine roller coaster to step into reclaiming their life. And boundaries is a huge part of this, as we will be discussing for sure. Yes.
Yes. And the topic of boundaries is a very personable
Mhm,
and vulnerable topic for both of us.
mhm,
Both of us have lived with chronic pain for most of our adult lives.
mhm.
So, and want to kind of preference the topic of boundaries with that this is not a one and done topic. You don't just learn boundaries and you can just, okay, I'm done and learn it. I've learned how to do it now. So, boundaries is a tough subject. So, we're going to get into kind of all of the steps and how boundaries work and why we need to have boundaries. And so, today's going to be a great topic, and I'm really excited to dive into it with you, Julie.
Yes, I think that's a great point you made. I view boundaries as ever evolving, right? Um, I love you, Michelle, and we have so many common similarities. But my chronic pain journey was started just over 30 years ago now, when I was a jockey and I landed on my head flying through the air with a thoroughbred racehorse, where I fractured my skull, broke my back, had a brain injury. And, you know, back then, 30 years ago, in my world, within my family structure, boundaries weren't really talked about or welcomed. So it was such a steep learning curve, understanding how we can set healthy boundaries to support ourselves, really, which is a pivotal foundational piece, I think, when it comes to chronic pain, how we support our body, so that we can live and feel like we have some control in areas that don't feel in our control sometimes. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we know that boundaries is a really, important subject for people that don't live with chronic pain, but it's a critical subject for us that live with chronic pain because once our boundaries are pushed and, we have maybe not had the best of boundaries, that creates more pain in our lives and it creates more
Mhm.
stress. It creates, a myriad of the chronic pain muck. And so, for us living with pain and not having this skill set really tuned up that it's important for all people to have boundaries, but especially when you live with chronic pain or chronic illness as well. And so and I agree with the journey of our families kind of can set us up to have really great boundaries, or they can set us up to have very poor boundaries. And for myself, typically, I am a people pleaser.
Mhm.
So I have never had good boundaries. I, again, with my family system, did not learn good boundaries. So, um, very similar to your story of flying through the air, landing on my head. After that journey for myself 20 years ago, I learned very quickly that I needed to have boundaries. And for many, many years of living with chronic pain, I did not have good boundaries.
Mhm.
And it's taken me many years to learn boundaries. And it is a constant 2 step forwards, 1 step back that I
Yeah,
forget, or I get very um, hooked in my own emotions around boundaries and what boundaries looks like and what healthy boundaries are. So, creating a healthy lifestyle includes creating healthy boundaries.
for sure. Um, I really view boundaries as the ultimate in self-care. And today we'll talk about this yes no concept, the yes no question that you can ask yourself that is tied to your boundary. And we'll go over that, but also bring up some internal boundaries within ourself and how we hold ourself accountable versus those external boundaries that people jump to think about most often when you think about boundaries. um, you know, and so we'll dive into some of those examples as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you brought up the thing about our internal boundaries as well, because I think we tend to think that boundaries are for other people and not for ourselves. And that is absolutely right, that we have to have our own boundaries internally within our own, bodies and with our own thought processes, and how
Yeah,
important that can be.
yeah, and that brings up some ideas around our mindset, around our boundaries, and if you've maybe not had a lot of work around boundaries, and that might create some fear within you with this idea that you're going to set a new boundary. There's also fear of rejection with friends and family or coworkers if you need to set a boundary on overcommitting yourself, for example. It stirs up a lot of stuff. And again, why we back down and might overcommit in maybe certain areas. And if you have chronic pain, what we know is as you become more and more depleted, then you're going to have an increase uptick in your pain levels. Or I also work with people with migraines, and then, being depleted, it seems to be just like the last straw before a migraine starts brewing. So, there's a lot of emotional pieces around boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also consider boundaries, a huge piece of the puzzle with also balancing in our life, of like how we balance our activities goes along with those internal boundaries as well. Looking at our lives in general and our place in the world, and how we fit in, with our lives and our family and our work, and kind of all the pieces that are us.
For sure. And I love that word balance that you just said because that's always on the forefront of my mind on how I support my body and to make sure that I keep my energy levels up and all the surrounding pieces that go into balance. For sure.
And
Yeah.
so how would you define boundaries? Like, how do we define it?
That's that okay, yeah. Um,
It is such a loaded question, isn't it?
it really is. It really is. I think where I go back to is when you again, working with my clients is really having them learn about their body, the language of their body, so that they can really get clear on what they need. And then once we understand what your body needs to function at its best, because even though we have chronic pain, you can still have a really great, fulfilling life.
Oh,
If you're,
absolutely. Absolutely. We want to
yeah,
have those really fulfilling relationships and really fulfilling life. And, even though we don't quote unquote call ourselves normal or normies, we, within our population, we are very, empathetic, compassionate, wonderful people that happen to live, a
yeah,
different way
yes.
in the world.
And boundaries just basically simply support your body, help to support your body so that you can gain traction or maintain your health moving forward, is how I
Yes.
look at it. Mhm.
Yes. I think that that's a really nice way to define it. It is how we have to live in the world.
Yes, and there's also, I like, why I love boundaries is because it does give you a sense of empowerment, because
Mhm.
boundaries is the one thing of the many things, but one thing for sure that is in your control. When there are certain pieces about your health or your bodies around migraines or chronic pain where oftentimes things can feel out of control, boundaries is a really great way to lean into those spots that where you do have control. Mhm.
Yes. And that control piece can give us, motivation in a lot of ways. But I think a lot of ways too, look, we don't think about the control. We think about all of the challenges because
Yeah.
there is so many challenges within
Mhm.
creating boundaries while you live with chronic pain.
Mhm.
And one of my biggest ones is, yes, it takes so much energy
Mhm.
and brain power that I have to really think about boundaries as a step by step process.
Mhm.
And because of living with pain can sometimes really muck up your brain and muck up your thought processes, that it's hard to kind of realign that and
Yeah.
hard to think about the steps of, okay, I have to create a new boundary. What does
Mhm.
that look like? What are the steps? How do I do it? How do I follow through with it?
Yeah.
And how do I kind of check myself before I wreck myself in that, context? And for myself, that I know that boundaries is really one of my weaknesses, and that it takes a lot for me to put together boundaries, think about boundaries,
Mhm.
and be vulnerable. And not also, I think on the flip side too, that when our boundaries get pushed
Mhm.
or maybe fall apart, that to not be so hard on ourselves.
Mhm.
That I know for myself that I get very hooked in, being very difficult on myself of being a failure, that oh, that boundary failed and now I just have to throw away the whole thing.
Yeah,
That
right. Yeah.
yeah, that we are the hardest ones on ourselves sometimes, especially around a very difficult subject like this.
Yeah, I think it is a tricky subject. Um, so I go back to where do we begin? I go back to why we had our talk just prior to this one. If you haven't at
Mhm.
all watched it, check out Decoding Your Pain Triggers,
Yeah.
because there we first need to identify what are our pain triggers, and really getting some understanding around your pain triggers. And then you develop your boundaries that support your body through, by your triggers, and how you can support your body to then go. And once you add a few layers, I think of boundaries like layers. Start with some easy ones first. and see.
Yeah, let's
Oh,
talk about that of like what
yeah.
is an example of a really easy boundary?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Um, so I go back to like what we discussed earlier is this yes, no question, right?
Yeah.
So when you say yes to something, you are also at the same time saying no to something, right?
Yep. And this is such a really interesting concept for me because I've never thought about it in this way. And I really feel like it's such a better, positive way of thinking about it than the way that I have thought about it traditionally of just boundaries as saying no.
Yeah. 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 And that's why I think boundaries have this negative connotation, right?
Yeah,
But really, we're
absolutely.
going to flip it as boundaries are positive. They support your body, right?
Yep.
They boundaries are designed to then help prevent acute flares, which can help even out chronic pain and decrease chronic pain. Boundaries are positive by migraine prevention. Yes, so some good yes, no examples. Okay, so I wrote a few down that are just real simple to maybe start to try. So if we think back to like our last talk where we discussed triggers, how about sleep? If sleep is one of your triggers, that when you become sleep deprived, you haven't been sleeping well, sleep often gets interrupted by chronic pain. Definitely, if you have a migraine, it can trigger a migraine. So, sleep can be definitely an area that I dive into with my clients. But let's just say, example, when you know that that is one of your triggers, if you say yes, these are what I refer to as more as internal boundaries within yourself. So when you say yes to turning off your lights at 10 p.m., what are you saying no to?
I'm saying no to, I'm saying no to the outside world because I'm
Yeah,
shutting down,
right?
but
Yeah.
I'm saying no to like less sleep. I'm saying no to fatigue.
Yes. So we take a look at when you say yes to turning off your lights, say at 10 p.m., you're saying no to that brain fog in the morning. You're saying no to dragging your kids to school, getting them fed, knowing how challenging that is with brain fog. You're saying no to that 2 p.m., 3 p.m. slump,
Mhm.
right? Okay. So here's another one. When you say yes to making time in your schedule for movement, what I like to, I mean, movement is life. And I do believe within chronic pain um, that it is about learning how to safely move your body.
Mhm.
But when we say yes to movement, setting time in our schedule, whatever that might look like, what are we saying no to?
Stiffness.
Yes, right. And we know, I mean, I have a 25-year past career as um, a body worker, and stiffness just compounds when we don't move,
Yep.
right? All that soft tissue and fascia just seem to just tighten and tighten, right? So that's what we're saying no to. Um, when you say, here's an external boundary, what I refer to more as external boundaries. So when you say no to commitments, so here's a no, right? So you can either do it a yes or a no to get you started. But when you say no to overcommitments, what are you saying yes to?
More energy,
Uh-huh. It
less
might,
pain.
yeah, it might be a no to this overcommitting myself to this staying late at work, working on this project. And you're saying yes to family time. Maybe you want to eat dinner with your family, right? It
Yep.
just comes down to, just like that word that you used earlier, Michelle, of balance, and how these boundaries can help create that balance and support your body. Yeah.
And I love that concept because that's a really, like, one super easy way that just comes right to my mind about boundaries and planning, that you can plan on having boundaries and having less commitments or not being overcommitted. That's a For me, it feels comfortable to be able to do that because I'm comfortable with being able to plan, and I
Mhm.
can see where I start getting overcommitted in my life of having 6 appointments a day of like, oh no, okay, let's, move some of those
Right.
off of there so that I'm not overcommitted, and
Yeah.
that I don't have to say a hard no, I just need to adjust. And I
Mhm.
think that that's a really good way to have a boundary and feel comfortable starting out.
Yeah, and a question also that I follow up with that with my clients, just like what this is a great example of the 6 appointments, right? Is a bit on the edge, right? Because we don't have that balance, right? So
Yes.
so as a coach, I say, tell me about, how does your body feel knowing that you have those 6 appointments in that day? How does your body feel throughout the day? How does your body maintain throughout the day with 6 appointments? And how do you feel at the end of your day? And it also might be the question I find for many of us with chronic pain is, it's funny how we know how to bring it and we don't want to push through, right? But how does your body feel the next day after 6 appointments?
Oh, yeah. You're just a wreck.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then we put it into the positive, right? So then I ask, knowing how your body feels at 6 appointments of that day and the next day, how would you like your body to feel?
Yeah. I mean, I want to be consistent. And I
Mm,
think having those, I'm going to consistently have chronic pain. I understand that, but going to, I, where I can see myself going into the pain triggers and overcommitment,
mhm,
because I have control of that,
mhm,
and I have control of, the underdoing, overdoing cycle,
mhm.
and, balancing that
Yeah.
and creating those boundaries for myself. And really, I think too, one of my biggest lessons is that I want to be able to teach my son about boundaries as well.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, a lot of times for myself, I may not be able to do it for myself, but I can do it for him.
Yeah. That's wonderful. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being a witness and learning that for this
Hmm.
generation. Yeah, I have 15-year-old twins, and yeah, we talk about it, and it's great. It's great. Um, I think understanding your body, like for example, going back to your 6 appointments, understanding how you want to feel, and then and understanding your triggers that get all in that mess.
Yeah.
And then once you know how you want to feel, that's where you can start setting some boundaries.
Yep. Like
Yeah.
backwards engineering it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So are we ready to talk about the steps?
I think so. I think that this is a perfect segue into that.
Okay. Look at us with a segue.
I know.
Okay, so here are some steps to creating healthy boundaries. You're going to first identify what you need. Just kind of like Michelle's beautiful example, right? Number two, you're then going to communicate assertively, not aggressively. Um, if this is like an external boundary that you need to place, otherwise, you're going to have a really compassionate conversation with yourself. If it's an
And I
internal
love that piece
boundary,
too. Yeah,
right?
about having internal boundaries and talking kindly to yourself. And
Yeah.
I think that that kind of comes up in one of the
Mhm.
other steps too, but really
Mhm.
communicating assertively to yourself of like,
Yeah.
Michelle, do not overcommit. Take those 6 appointments down to 2.
So then number three is you're going to stick to your boundaries, even when others resist. And I would like to say that those that have benefited from your lack of boundaries will give you the biggest pushback when you start
Yep.
setting boundaries. So
Yep.
it's good to just have that awareness and to be like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay. It's not to say that your boundary is bad.
How do
Um,
That's a good question too. How do
yeah.
we, when we stick to our boundaries,
Mhm.
is there a way to see or kind of preempt seeing people push on your boundaries?
Is there a way to what?
See, like preemptively see when your boundaries are getting
Oh,
pushed.
yeah, I think it goes back to that. Really, it's about communicating your needs,
Yeah.
and it's not about them. And I think that's when they get where there's some of that, when they misinterpret that it's about them, but it's about you, always going back to what you need and your body, right?
Yeah.
Because,
Absolutely.
mhm, yeah.
I love
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So number four is that setting a new healthy boundary takes time. It's not going to be perfect. It might need some tweaking. And in the process, we're going to give ourselves a lot of grace. Um, we even had a talk on grace in another chronic pain compassionate conversation. So yes, yes. Again, trial and error is part of the process.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
And giving ourselves grace is such a, again, important life skill that we tend to miss, but it really comes full circle when we talk about boundaries and being kind to ourselves and knowing that a lot of times we push our own boundaries, others will push our boundaries, and that we have to, yes, stick with you know where our boundaries are and give ourselves grace in being there.
Yeah. Really good. Um, and number five, we want to acknowledge full disclosure that it can definitely feel uncomfortable, and getting uncomfortable with being uncomfortable with something new is okay. Setting boundaries can push you just slightly out of your comfort zone. Um, and recognize that when you stretch out of your comfort zone, you're going to feel that. And just pause and breathe and acknowledge, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which brings me to number six, that Also, when you feel that uncomfortableness, which is normal and natural, is to always bring it back to your wellness why. And I think of your a wellness why as what drives you. How do you want to feel? So setting that, let's use your example, Michelle, for balance and the 6 appointments in one day, bringing it back to your wellness why of setting those boundaries so that you can feel consistent within your body, it sounded like, and creating that balance between work, family, and all the other pieces in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise all of the balance gets wonky, and then you
Yeah.
start throwing out your boundaries to, try and realign things, and then all of a sudden you don't have boundaries, and then all of a sudden you don't have balance. And so it
Right.
kind of just one flows into the other. And I love that, we're always kind of looking into why do we need these things, and where can I make those changes?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because
And
really, like, empowering ourselves and
Mhm,
having that empowerment and having that control,
mhm.
and and grasping onto that control, that we may not have control a lot of things around our chronic pain, but we do, again, have control of our boundaries.
Yes, definitely. Most definitely. I love it.
Yeah. And I love the concept that it is, the empowerment, the self-care, and that, having these steps and going through these steps, whether it's, checking in with yourself daily about your boundaries and checking in on what steps you are taking, or if it's weekly around, okay, how are my boundaries looking? Or if it's that situation when you have a boundary that has been pushed and you have to kind of immediately, turn on a dime and like, okay, how
Mhm.
do I get this boundary that's being pushed, or that I'm pushing my own boundaries?
Yeah.
And
I think that's a great point you bring up because having that regular check-in of whether it be weekly is a lovely like reevaluating and reflecting on your week, right?
Mhm.
Whatever time that is. Do you do that on a Friday at the end of your week? Do you do it on Sunday, looking forward through your next week? What type of reflection period do you take? And thinking about events that happened, and you get to ask yourself, are there any boundaries I need to revisit? Did they get a little blurry? Do I need to revise some boundaries? Or do I need to create new ones? So, all of those are your options. Yeah.
Yes, and I think too that boundaries kind of go with the seasons too.
Mhm,
For us, that we, families and children, we kind of have to shift our boundaries going into summer, and what does that look like? And our time is different.
mhm.
And those scheduling boundaries of, having our children go out and do a ton of things, which means that we are doing a ton of things also.
Yeah, right? Yeah,
So,
activities and
yeah.
yes, and yes. So that's a great thing. So if we say yes to, our kids doing, all these sports and activities, and you're going to bring the snacks and all the things, then what are you saying no to? What are you saying yes to? And then I go back to knowing that prior, say that day, say you've got a big day, prior, the days leading up to a big day, I say, what support does your body need now? Knowing that you have a big day coming. And maybe what things might you say no to? 3 days, 2 days, 1 day prior to a big event so that you can say yes to that big event if that's important to you. Yeah.
Yes, and I love aligning those things too with, what is important to you and
Mhm.
outlining that of, okay,
Yeah.
these events are really important. So you do have to again backwards engineer like your life of like, okay, the week before we're not doing
Mhm. Yeah.
all of the parties and all of the birthday parties and all of the things. We'll go to one birthday party and let's pick out that one that's, important to my son, and then we can go to, the family vacation that is very important,
Yeah.
that,
Boundaries,
really.
for sure. Boundaries support your values, right? And how do we live through our values? Through our boundaries so that we can create the life that we want because we are the CEO of our life and our body. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, giving us that chance to have that control, that chance to, make our lives whole again,
Mhm. Yeah.
taking care of ourselves,
Yeah.
that self-compassion, self-empowerment, all of those really good things that we fall so vulnerable to when we don't have them set up.
Mhm. So
Yeah.
we do have some questions for everyone,
Yes.
whether you're
Yes, we do.
here with us live or listening to us on a recording. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So our first question. So we want everyone to comment. And if you want to comment on the recording, Julie and I are really good about
Mhm.
going into the comments on our LinkedIn and on our YouTubes about answering and, chatting in the comments too. So our first question is, what has stopped you from setting a boundary in the past? And this is a hard one,
That's a loaded
because
question.
it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I
But it's
think that for
yeah.
myself, one of mine is that I always feel like I'm gonna disappoint everyone if I have boundaries.
It is a loaded question, and it's great to peel back the onion and get to the core crux. Um, and what I offer people is it's better to disappoint others than disappoint yourself and have regrets, especially if you have chronic pain or migraines, because
Yeah.
you will forever be in that loop and that cycle. Yeah.
And if we go back to the yes, no
Mhm,
question that I
mhm.
love, because you can reframe this of what did I say no to, but what did I say yes to?
Yeah. Boundaries are positive. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is it's such a hard reframe too if you've felt as though boundaries were negative for so many years, that if
Yeah.
that's what you were taught,
Yeah.
or if you just didn't have a good boundary structure because of, family dysfunction or family enmeshment, that, yeah, boundaries are positive and boundaries are self-care.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Do we have another question? We
I
have.
believe we do.
Yes. So this comes back to what support does your body need? It circles back to evaluating your pain triggers, understanding those so that you can build support around what your body needs and those pain triggers for prevention. We definitely want to prevent acute flares, decrease chronic pain, decrease your migraine frequency, duration. So, what support does your body need? That is a fabulous question. It might be as simply as starting with, I need more water every day. Great. Let's set a new boundary around water intake, right? Again,
Yeah.
when you say yes to more water, what do you say no to? Ooh,
Yeah, dehydration and fatigue and yeah, all of the things that
water
we
is, yeah. I mean, our joints aren't going to move freely. De- um, it's definitely a trigger for migraines. Easy peasy,
Mhm.
right there. That was one of my top three migraine triggers way back in the day, was not getting enough water. And for
Yep.
whatever reason, I required a lot. So, getting really clear and setting that boundary. So what does that look like? Okay, so, and structure how to support that. Increasing just more water, grabbing your favorite water bottle, tracking it, with some your favorite little stones on the window ledge. And every time you refill your water bottle, you move a stone over to the other side of the windowsill, whatever, But those are great ways to, again, just these tweaks that can just really support and improve your health.
Yep. Starting small. I
Yeah.
love that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep. Small and consistent.
Yeah. So, really, what is the one boundary that you all would like to set and decide? Yeah. And to start. Yeah. Well, do you have any closing remarks, Michelle, that you would like to share?
I am just so glad that we got to talk about this topic. Yeah, that this is, yeah, an uncomfortable topic for me because it is so personally hard, but I do really find that, talking about these tough subjects, cements the need for them in my life.
Mhm.
And, making a commitment to have boundaries is making a commitment to myself and to my health and to my family. And I just really enjoy having this conversation with you. This has been really wonderful.
Oh, likewise.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you have some things happening right now in your world,
I
in your
do.
business.
I do. So our latest project at Moving Through Chronic Pain
Mhm.
is a two-part project. We have Difficult Dialogues, which is 52 scripts for providers to use and understand in talking to their patients around chronic pain. And so, with those scripts, there's also a workshop series that's called Open Dialogues. And so, right now, we are really excited to do our first workshop. It's going to be on June 7th, and that's a Saturday, and it's going to be in the morning on Pacific time. And so, Dr. Singping Chow and myself are going to go through our first workshop about difficult dialogues, how to have these conversations within the context of chronic pain, what that looks like. So here is our slide about difficult dialogues and our scripting. And so this kind of gives us more information about what these dialogues are, who they're for, creating strategies around compassion. And so, yes, it is very exciting that we have these to offer our audience for providers, because we know that conversations for providers and for patients become difficult and can, really
Mhm.
go really well, or they can go really poorly, and we want them to go really well. And we've created these scripts to be able to do that. And we've created the open dialogues workshops to be able to use the examples, do a lot of role plays, bring up those actual scripts, go through the scripts, and learn skills around communication around chronic pain that can really help providers, with these relationships, building trust and creating better relationships with people living with chronic pain. So our first one is going to be on June 7th. So all of the information is going to be in the comments and on our website, movingthroughchronicpain.com.
Awesome.
So
I'm looking forward to the workshop. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I have, with my one-on-one work with clients, I have a free resource on my website, your Pathway Through Pain workbook, that's open to anyone to grab. It definitely goes along with a lot of what we discussed today on getting clear on checking in with yourself and your body, on how you feel, how you get to honor yourself that day, which definitely boundaries get to support that. So that is a free resource for anyone to grab right away over on my website at juliemavros.com. Yeah.
What a great resource. And you also have a 12-week coaching program as well.
I do. I have a couple different programs. My Empowered Resilience is my signature program, 12 weeks, one-on-one, to go through all the steps to really change your life and get some transformation happening for sure. Yep, all that's over on my website if you want to take a look. And always open just to chat as well. And you can book a whole body consultation if you want to chat. And I love it. So if you have questions from today, you can also book one of those to talk personally, because, I do work with people one-on-one just because the stuff is so personal. And yeah, all the information's over there.
Perfect, Julie. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. And I really look forward to our next compassionate conversation. I believe our next compassionate conversation is going to be in May.
Yes.
And we are going to be doing a little bit of an interview series, which is exciting. So Julie is going to interview me. So that'll be fun, a little bit of a different subject matter. So we'll get to kind of dive into all of those things. She'll be asking me kind of fun questions, and we'll have a conversation about that. And then in June, we are going to do the reverse, and I will get to interview Julie. And we also have some really exciting subjects coming up for the summer. So yeah, stay tuned, follow us. We would love to talk with any of you anytime.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks again, Michelle. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.